Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a dark, cautionary folktale passed down by elders, a story meant to help us grasp a terrifying, mythological fraying of reality itself, known as the liminal void. Think of it as an architectural breakdown, but, well, not a breakdown of bricks and mortar, but of existence itself. So gather your focus, because we are in for a seriously chilling ride.
The hook of this dark history starts in the isolated village of Oakhaven. As the story goes, the survivors of the first frost absolutely did not find peace. After a brutal winter where their sheep were inexplicably reduced to mere sacks of dust, the villagers were desperate. Driven by hunger, they tried to live right among those dusty remains. But the air in their valley had fundamentally changed. It had turned liminal. They survived the frost, only to enter a much more unsettling state.
Act 1. The Fraying World.
The elders refer to this new reality as the uncanny aftermath. It's basically a state where the hard boundaries between the living world and the shapeless void just begin to fray. It completely shattered the idea that the village of Oakhaven was a place of safety or refuge. Instead, the entire valley had mutated into a dangerous threshold.
You really see this stark structural contrast through the eyes of a local farmer named Hrolf. This is a man whose shadow had suddenly and inexplicably grown heavier than his own body. He noticed the changes first right in the architecture of his own home. He would stare into the angle where two walls met, and suddenly, the corner felt slightly deeper than reality. For a terrifying heartbeat, it would seem to literally peel back like a wet scab, revealing these gray, pulpy depths that simply should not exist.
Act 2. The Parable of Hrolf.
I want you to put yourself in Hrolf's shoes for a second. Imagine standing in your own home and hearing these exact words drifting up from your cellar. Hrolf, come see how soft the earth has become. It sounds exactly like your wife, but here's the deeply terrifying catch. The cellar door is bolted shut from the outside, and your pale, shivering wife, she's actually standing right behind you in the hallway.
And it gets worse, because the voice calling from the cellar was almost too perfect. It had her exact lilting cadence, her sharp intake of breath, but it completely lacked the natural vibration of a human throat. It sounded wet and rhythmic, kind of like a recording played through a shroud of wet wool. The elders always point out that the silence of the monster didn't return to Oakhaven as a mass of physical flesh, but rather as this sourceless, wet sound.
This entity is known in the folktales as the Boneless. And it's not just some predator hunting in a winter storm. It doesn't merely consume structure, it replaces it. It mimics the everyday shapes of the world, specifically to lure the marrow out of the living. The monster had literally become the architecture of their lives.
Act 3. A Maze of the Uncanny. The villagers started reporting these deeply uncanny observations that perfectly capture the bizarre structural changes taking place all around them. Imagine walking down a familiar forest path, reaching out and finding the forest trees are slightly rubbery to the touch, their bark completely slick like human skin. Or walking into your own kitchen to find your tables stacked together like teeth and your chairs facing the walls in silent worship of the gaps in the stone. They were forced to navigate a twisted logic they completely failed to grasp.
Naturally, the villagers tried to fight back. Desperate to reclaim their homes from this liminal nightmare, they attempted sequential iron rites, trying to use traditional iron wards to seal the thresholds against the void. But the rites completely failed. And the reason why is chilling. You simply cannot ward off a monster when it is the very room you are standing in.
And the elder's tale grows even darker here, warning that this terrifying ecosystem expands way beyond Oakhaven. They point to the high, frozen fjords, warning of other nameless entities and shapeless horrors just lurking up there in the frozen heights. The Boneless is really just one part of a much larger, frayed reality.
Act 4. Dwellers of the Threshold.
Now, if you happen to stay too long in a house visited by the shapeless, you don't just die. You undergo this grim, step-by-step transformation along the liminal path. First, you eventually stop feeling your own ribs. Then, you become a creature that looks like a human, but if struck, you wouldn't bleed. Finally, you simply deflate. You lose all physical structure entirely, leaving behind nothing but a pile of empty clothes.
And what's left behind? Just a lingering smell of old tallow. That haunting sensory detail is quite literally all that remains of the victims. They don't pass on, they become what the elders call dwellers of the threshold. It is absolutely horrifying to think about. Let's look back at Hrolf for a moment.
He stands at the edge of the barrens, observing this eerie, shifting horizon. Notice the stark difference between the natural world and what he sees. Normal mountains versus flat, fluid mountains, where the gray sky presses down on the world like a heavy thumb. He realizes right then that he can't run, because when the world itself is the monster, there's nowhere left to go.
The Elder's final lesson.
This folktale leaves us with a brilliant warning that completely reorients our survival instincts. The elder tells us, do not fear the howling wolf at your door. A wolf is a traditional beast, right? It has a heart that can be pierced. Instead, fear the subtle, uncanny anomalies in your everyday spaces. Fear the room that suddenly feels too wide. Fear the voice that sounds just a little too clear. And most importantly, fear the shadow that does not move when you do.
Because the underlying motive of this shapeless void flips everything we know about predatory monsters. The boneless does not want your life. It wants your form. It literally wants to hollow you out and wear the architecture of your existence. So, I'll leave you with this deeply unsettling question to ponder. The next time you find yourself alone in a quiet room or staring into a corner that feels just a little too deep, does your shadow move when you do? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep your eyes open.